but I am excited to be here with you today. I'm excited because I think back to the spectrum of my career. Thankfully, my bio wasn't read because it would have discredited me from speaking to you. It would have told you I was a history major right up front, and that would have discredited me at the outset. But it would have also told you that I've been with the Indians for 23 years. And when I came in with the Indians, I can remember sitting in John Hart's office in Municipal Stadium, in the old stadium where the football stadium now lies, talking about and making trades or being at the winter meetings. And John reaching behind his desk and pulling files out to grab scouting reports. And I can remember reaching behind me and grabbing media guides to do bios, look for bios of the players, and having stat books on our laps as we talked about making trades. To think about that to where we are today with pitch FX and hit FX and field FX coming on the horizon, the amount of data and technology that drives every single one of our decisions, and not just on the baseball side where thousands of pieces of data are generated with every inning and on every pitch that we then have to determine how to analyze and how to apply to decision making. But when you think about the other side of the business, which I now oversee as president, whether it's digital ticketing, iBeacons that monitor what our fans' behaviors are within the ballpark, whether it's the way they consume, the fact that I was watching the game for a few minutes, only at the tail end of the talk, just to see what was going on. But technology, data, analytics are a core part of my world. And they weren't a core part of my world 23 years ago, and 5 years ago they were a very different part than they are today. So I'm excited to be in front of you because of that, because you are leaders in those areas. But those aren't the areas that I lead within our organization. So I want to talk to you about something that you think about, and you all are leaders in your areas, so you all deal with, but you're probably not talking about today. And that's why I'm going to talk to you a little about some of our challenges and where people, talent, and where leadership fits into overcoming our challenges. But I definitely want to save time because I want to learn from you today as well, and I want to sit and hear your questions and maybe talk to you a little about and get some ideas from you on the technology and analytics side as well. I want to talk to you a little about the talent and the people side. My entire career has been around that side, whether it was in player personnel for 17 years or whether it's been in the business side now. And there are three, as I shifted to the president's role, understanding the challenges that we deal with were very important to designing a strategy to overcome those. Three major challenges, to give you a brief overview. Many of you, I think all of you, are from this market, so you'll be somewhat familiar with. One, and obviously I just mentioned the changing media landscape, right? So the way that fans consume content is far different today than it was 2 or 3 years ago, is far different than it will be 2 or 3 years today. There's a fragmentation, there's a proliferation of the way fans consume it. It's far more portable on phones, on tablets. That creates a much different level of competition for us. Secondly, the in-home experience, right? I think about this all the time. Not that long ago, if we were to sit at home and watch a game, we were doing it on a standard definition television. I mean, think about that. We joke about the fact that our kids, don't know what it's not like to have a DVR and rewind and watch, or even a remote control, which we didn't have as kids growing up. But, think about it. It wasn't that long ago. We didn't have a choice. We watched a game, a baseball game on it. Now, if I were to put up a baseball game on SD television right now for you, you would laugh. It would be hard to see. Again, so what we're competing with is 60-inch television, surround sound, a much more compelling home entertainment product. That's why a lot of our revenue have shifted towards television contracts. Much more proliferation, whether they're in a bar, whether they're in their home. The competition, it's harder to attract fans, and the expectations for fan experience is far different. So for 20 years ago, when a fan came to Progressive Field, when we built it, when it was Jacobs Field, no matter where they sat in the ballpark, the experience was the same. Scorecard, pencil, different perspective, right? Different viewpoint where you saw, but largely the same experience. Very different fan experience now. Fans want to interact with the game. They want to interact with each other. They want to see the field. They want segmented, targeted fan experiences. So we have to redesign the fan experience. First major challenge, changing media, changing sports entertainment landscape. Second, Major League Baseball's revenue sharing system. Major League Baseball's revenue sharing system is largely dependent on local revenue, which makes it more market dependent. Very similar to the amount of revenue shared in basketball, very different from the NFL. The NFL is largely based on national television contracts that allow a team like Green Bay to compete with New York teams and Chicago teams. Major League Baseball, very different. Similar to the NBA, but the NBA has a strict salary cap. We have no salary cap, and we're largely locally dependent for our revenue. Two major challenges within the baseball CBA landscape that we don't have control over, and I focus on controlling the controllable. So as we think about our challenges as they exist, it's competing against competitors that have 2 to 3 times the resources that we have. Not just 2 to 3 times major league payroll, 2 to 3 times they can spend on technology. And we know what that means. That's a huge gap for us, a resource gap, not just a revenue gap, but a resource gap. It can be in people, it can be in coaches, it can be in facilities, but the way they deploy those revenue gaps can vary. Third major significant challenge we have to overcome is just the market dynamic in Cleveland. Obviously, all of you have lived here for many years of our over 110-year existence. We were one of the 10 biggest cities in the United States. And then, while it's still one of the greatest cities to live in the United States, a manufacturing-based economy evolved, a middle class that existed and was a thriving driver of the local economy largely went away. The wealthier population moved further outside of the city to the point that now we pump our fists about 13,000 people living downtown. And in reality, there's 160,000 people working downtown. So again, there's a ton of great things happening in Cleveland, but for me, running a business in downtown Cleveland, talking about that home entertainment product, trying to get people out of Westlake, out of Avon Lake, out of Solon to come downtown with that compelling home enterprise, with that portable capability of watching a game, with the reality that so few people are working and living downtown. That third major challenge is just the reality of the decline in population, the distance in population that it's moved, and the lack of a regional capability that we've got. We've got the Lake, we've got Pittsburgh, we've got Cincinnati, and we've got Detroit. Not a huge region, that some of the major league teams have. So those are our challenges. And where does that fit in today? Because leadership plays a huge role, because you've got to understand very precisely and very clearly your challenges, much more in depth than that, but understand to develop a strategy. And in my experience, to create a belief within your people that not only are those challenges not insurmountable, but they're overcomable, we're capable of overcoming them and winning championships, it takes a special strategy and process. And for me, I'm a believer that it's driven by people. Technology plays a huge role in it, but it's driven by people. Because there is no one idea, there is no one leader, and there is no one system that's going to allow us to overcome what are objectively, huge odds and huge challenges. It takes 1,000 incremental efficiencies. It takes every single person in the organization understanding our challenges, understanding their role in overcoming their challenges, and all directly contributing and feeling empowered to contribute to overcome those challenges. And that's where people fits in, whether it's players or whether it's front office operations, whether it's technology, whether it's an intern, whether it's a manager, whether it's a leader. That's where talent and people fit in overcoming huge challenges in the business I worked in. One of the great things for me as I transitioned from baseball to the business side was understanding that the formulas that we used and thought about for so many years in talent acquisition on the player personnel side were so transferable and so analogous to what I dealt with hiring executives. So when I went out to hire a CTO or a CIO about 2 or 3 years ago and changed the paradigm of how we view technology in the Indians organization, I thought about it in a lot of the same way as when we examine a trade or we think about a draft pick. I always think about talent through the lens of baselines and separators, right? There are baselines, things in my experience, and again, everybody has different semantics for how they think about them, but things in my experience have to be there, right? So what do you guys think? Give me one baseline that you think has to be present when we acquire a player or we acquire a leader in the front office. Values would be one. What's the simplest one? What's the most obvious one? Talent, right? Skills. Because, we'd like to say a lot of feel-good things have to be there, but ultimately, if there's not some base level of intellectual bandwidth or intellectual curiosity or reasoning capabilities, if there's not the ability to throw for Corey Kluber a 92-mile-an-hour fastball. Sure, he can develop, and he has developed unbelievably in his understanding of how to attack hitters, in his understanding of how to utilize his more consistent delivery to locate his pitches and repeat his delivery, his understanding of where conditioning and flexibility and core strength fit into that. All those things are developable, but there had to be a basic talent level there first. That's just a given, right? The second given for me is one that I talked about a lot with a friend of mine who's the assistant GM of the Falcons now, when he was with the Browns a long time ago, and then he was the director of player personnel for the Patriots with 3 Super Bowl championships. And that said, it's got to be important to you. It's got to be important. It's got to be personal. You know, I want to work with people. I want to bet on players where what they do is personal. It's got to be meaningful. Your work has to be meaningful for you. You want to hire people, regardless of the position you're hiring them for, that the work they do is more than just coming in, crossing a T, checking a box, and leaving. There's got to be an amount of pride in what you do. If you're going to overcome huge odds, if you're going to do great things, if you're going to celebrate at the end of the day doing something special and be part of something special, you want to find people who desire to have their work be more than just a 9-to-5, check a box, drive home. And when I think about the players we pick, I'm looking for people who it matters to them. You know, Scott, that guy Scott Pioli I was talking about, used to say it's got to be one of the 3 most important things to him. You know, family, faith, football. You know, I'm not sure what order it is, and I'm not sure those are the 3 things, but I tell you what, baseball, when we bet on a player, has got to be one of the 3 most important things. It's got to be one of the most important things. If we're going to bet on that person, if I'm going to live or die by the decision we make, you know, a lot of other variables enter into the mix that can derail injury, umpires, field, but I want to know it's important to the person. And the third baseline for me was, you know, I searched for a word, what the right word was, and I was sitting in my suite, my very first year as general manager in 2002, and I was watching a game with a guy named Pat Gillick, who's a Hall of Fame baseball executive, Hall of Fame general manager. Started the Toronto Blue Jay franchise, took 1 world championship there, went to Baltimore, took them to the World Series, went to Seattle, got to the World Series there, and won a World Series with the Philadelphia Phillies. I mean, he's a scout by nature, and he's an incredible person and a guy I respect immensely. So I asked Pat, you know, very open-ended question intentionally. We're watching a game, my first year, young GM, and I said, you know, Pat, what do you look for in players? You know, intentionally not being very precise, and I just left it hanging. And of course, Pat, as a lot of smart people, very comfortable with silence, he sat and he thought about it for a while, and he said, Mark, I'm looking for dependable, reliable players. And that was it. You know, he intentionally wasn't going to give me any more. I mean, I'm a competitor of his, right? So I'm driving home that night, and I'm thinking about a trade that I had made earlier. And I'm thinking about a player that I pulled into the parking lot every day, and I saw his Rolls-Royce Bentley sitting there. And, you know, good guy, actually a good guy, a pretty good player. But it always bothered me. Every time I thought about that guy, it bothered me. From the first time he showed up in spring training, 20 pounds overweight, to the fact that he had some other issues and off-the-field stuff was questionable. And I thought, what is it about? And you know what? I'm not sure how much he cares, and he's ultimately not a dependable, reliable guy. And I'm not losing sleep over the guy that gets hurt. I'm not losing sleep over the guy that the umpire makes a bad call and he strikes out in a crucial situation. I'm not losing sleep over the guy where the ball hits a pebble, even on the nicest fields in the world, and takes a bad hop. You know, I'm losing sleep over the guy that's not consistent, that's not dependable, that's not reliable, that doesn't control the controllable. And that's the third baseline for me. I want the dependable, reliable person, whether it's in an IT position as a manager, whether it's as the shortstop of the Cleveland Indians. I want the person, the woman or the man, that are going to control the controllable. Because you know what? There's a ton of things that we can't control. A lot of those challenges, I can't control the economy of the city of Cleveland. I have very little control over the Major League Baseball revenue sharing system, right? But I want to know that we've got a bunch of people who wake up every day. When it's the players, it may not be the outcomes, the hits they have, the wins and losses, but I want to know this. When they get out of their car in the parking lot, the way they talk to the attendant in the parking lot, to the way they walk down the hall and talk to the custodians, maybe most importantly, the way they talk to their teammates, their associates, right? Because we play 162 games in 183 days. And before that, we play 30 games in spring training and are there for 45 days. So we're living together. So if they're not functioning efficiently with their teammates, with the people they work with, that's an inefficiency. That's an inefficiency. Again, that's something that's not controlling what you can control. To the way they watch video, to the way they work out in the weight room, to the way they do their prehab, all those thousands of things within our lives that we can control, the things that we can control each and every day, that's dependability, reliability, that's consistency, right? So some talent, intellectual bandwidth, that it's meaningful, important to you, a sense of urgency, it's personal, and dependability, reliability, those are the three baselines. The separator for me, when we think about talent, the one question that I ask when we're talking about a first-round draft pick, or we're talking about a senior hire, or even if we're talking about an intern that we're going to hire, the one question that I ask that's a separator for me, tell me about a situation where they faced adversity. That's what I want to know. I want to know toughness. I want to know character. I want to know accountability. That's, to me, what the separator is. Because it's a very amazing thing. When you start to examine how people handle adverse conditions and adverse situations, there's two different ways. They either look at it like, that's my flaw, that's my weakness, that's my limitation, I'm going to stay away from those circumstances. Or they embrace it. Hey, that was a situation where I had a struggle and a setback. But you know what that was? That was an opportunity for me to learn, to grow, to develop, to improve, to emerge better. Growth mindset. Anyone ever here read the book by Carol Dweck called Mindset? Growth mindset. I'm looking for people with a growth mindset, people that don't have a fixed mindset, people that believe that they can take their experiences, they can learn and grow and develop and improve and get better. And you find that when you examine how they, sometimes I'll get from our scouts, I just haven't seen him in it. This kid, of course, he's a high school player, about to be the #1 draft pick, right? He hasn't had a lot of failure. He may not have had failure on the baseball field, but I guarantee you, if you look in the classroom, if you look in his family life, if you do enough work, you can find a situation where that person has encountered adversity. And you may have to ask a little deeper, you may have to dig deeper in the questions. It may be, tell me about a situation in the last week where you faced adversity, and how'd you react? But I'm always looking at that, and I'm always looking at the mindset and the approach and the mental approach that a person takes to those situations. Great example of a player that we've got now that really fits that incredibly growth mindset. You guys know who Michael Brantley is? Yeah. All-star player, quickly emerging as one of the best outfielders in the American League all around. But let me tell you what's special about this guy are the things that you can't see. It's all those things I just talked about. Dependable, reliable, yes, check. Is it important to him? Check. Dad was a big leaguer, grew up around the game. Is it personal? Does he control the controllable? Check, check. Is he accountable? Is he accountable? Beginning of the season, Michael had probably the best spring training of any player in our camp. He had a great spring, meaningless, right? But a great spring, always good to see. We signed him to a multi-year deal in spring training, a long-term contract. Everything was feeling really good. He got off to a good start, first 3 weeks of the season, best hitter on the team. We went on a West Coast road trip, 10-day road trip, 9 games. We struggled badly. Played the San Francisco Giants, played Anaheim, teams that have turned out to be really good teams. Michael struggled, really struggled. Did not get a hit. 9 games, no hits. Now, again, I'm going to assume that a lot of you are probably not baseball fans. And what happens when a major league player goes through 9 games and doesn't get a hit, you learn a lot about that guy. And sometimes 9 bad games or 10 bad days turn into a bad month, turns into a bad season. And a lot of guys tend to be like, that was just a bad year. I'm going to write that one off and start over next year. And you know what? Multi-year contract, 6-year deal. Hey, I'm all right. I'll be fine. I'll come back next year and get back after it. Not Michael Brantley. So 9 games, no hits. Red eye back. after the last game in San Francisco or Anaheim, and they land at 7 in the morning. We're off. We play the next night, 7 p.m., and I'm down walking underneath the ballpark at 10 a.m. Now, I will tell you, I'm 23 years in Major League Baseball. Players do not get there at 10 a.m., ever. Not sometimes, not maybe, never, unless they're hurt and rehabbing. So I'm walking down the concourse, and I walk by the batting cage, and I hear crack, crack. And I think that's weird. I'm thinking maybe it's one of the coaches and his son, so I'm going to pop in and see him and see what's going on. Who could it be? And I walk in, and there's Michael Brantley, hitting off a tee, right? So how many of you have daughters or sons that hit off a tee, and you think, well, they'll never hit off a tee when they get older. Here's Michael Brantley working on his swing, trying to figure out what's wrong, thinking about what happened to him, and determined to take those experiences and use it as fuel to get better. Major league player. And now, this is the true story. You can go back and look at the day-by-days. It makes for a great story, and it wouldn't have had to happen to make it any less appropriate. He was an all-star. He's having an incredible year, one of the best years in the American League. But that night, he had 5 RBI, and I think he had a homer and like 3 hits and 5 RBI. And as that last hit sailed in the outfield, and as the homer went over the fence, my thought was not, yeah, we're going to win this game. My thought was, yeah, we have a nice crowd of 27,000, 30,000. My thought was, that's a guy. That's a guy I'm going to bet on every day of the week. That's accountability. You know what the people you don't want to bet on do? They make excuses. They find a reason, because there's always excuses out there. You know what Michael Brantley does? He takes accountability. He takes ownership. He finds a way to go through that tough period, to embrace it, and a way to get better. That's the separator when it comes to players. If you assemble a group of those people, you got a really good chance to have a great team, right? You're going to start with a good team, but you're still going to be assembling talent. You're still just bringing talent together. You're identifying the attributes, the baselines and the separators. You're bringing talent together. When you deploy that talent into a culture, which could be a whole other topic, where people understand how important they are to success, where it's clear that every single time that they're involved with acquiring a person or a player or an associate, that this is an important decision. We're not just filling a role, we're not just checking a box, but we have a chance to make an impact in this organization today. And if we miss, it's going to be painful. It's not just important, but guess what? It's essential. We're not going to succeed without obsessing about every single hire we do, from the intern, to the senior executive. And we're not going to succeed whether we obsess over every single player acquisition opportunity we get, whether it's in Latin America, whether it's in Asia, whether it's in the draft, whether it's a trade, whether it's a free agent sign. We're going to think about how can we be best in knowing every single variable that exists within the equation. And then we're going to deploy those people into a culture where they understand how important they are, which ultimately gives us the best chance to not just assemble talent, but build a team. One more very important thing necessary: when good teams become great teams, when good teams defy the objective odds, no matter what the talent is, there's going to be one more thing present, and that's leadership. And unfortunately, no matter where we go in today's society, right, and you think about the schools that my kids go to, and the middle schools and the lower schools, and I think about the kids that come into our player development system, and I think about the young people that come into the Indians' offices. And leadership's in short supply today, guys. Whether you're talking about halls of government, definitely in short supply, or you're talking about boardrooms, or you're talking about classrooms or locker rooms. We, for some reason, live in a culture that places an emphasis, again, not on being bad people, but on blending in. And when I deal with young people all the time, and it takes to lead, it takes some ability, some lack of fear to stand out. You may sound stupid. You may stand out from the crowd, and what you say may not be embraced, because you're not only holding yourself to a high standard, but you're holding others to high standards. Not easy to do. Pretty lonely. Can be tough, can be embarrassing. And in today's culture, in today's society, where there's a premium on kind of blending in and not standing out, that leadership capability that drives good organizations to be great organizations and overcome huge odds, or good teams to be great teams, is not very common. So I'm going to go really quickly through my personal model for leadership, because again, I set baselines and separators when I think about potential leaders for our organization. And this is just nomenclature or semantics that have resonated with me over my life, but I think ultimately, we all have our own words that we use. I've got 3 basic baselines that when I think about leadership have to exist for someone to be capable. So when we hired Terry Francona, who I knew for years, or when we think about hiring another senior leader, there are 3 basic things I think about. One is awareness. Awareness of self, first of all, because the single biggest derailer of human beings, the single biggest derailer the single biggest behavioral derailer is insecurities, right? And every single one of us has them. They can be over education, they can be over culture, they can be over physical appearance. Regardless of what it is, every single one of us has some level of insecurity. And it's just a question of how aware are we of them and how do we manage them? Because how many times have we sat, through either a speech, or we've sat across from someone managing us, or we've sat in a meeting and we thought, did she just say that? Or did he just say that? And you think about what was the root for saying something that was really odd, that lost credibility, that caused people to disengage and detach. And usually if you trace the root of that back, there's some level of insecurity, underlying that. So self-awareness, what my insecurities are, maybe most importantly, what my strengths are, and certainly what my limitations are, so I can surround myself with people that complement me really well. Awareness of self, one, awareness of others, two, right? You can call that compassion, you can call that empathy, whatever you want to call it, but it can't just be a chair you're sitting across from. When I hire someone, when someone works with me, it's a covenant. It's a covenant. I'm going to demand a lot, and I'm going to expect them to contribute a ton to us overcoming what we got to overcome, but I'm going to give back a tremendous amount as well. I want to know what their goals, expectations, aspirations are. And I want to help them meet those. I want to know what their cultures come from too, so I can understand where they come from and how I can best try to communicate. I want to know who that person is. They're not just a vehicle to help me achieve what I want to achieve. So awareness of self and awareness of others are absolutely possible. And then two, what we're all doing there, we're communicating, right? You take that information you get from awareness and you deploy it in a way that helps you achieve your goals, and that's communication. That's what a communication. And to me, the heart of communication to me has always been about authenticity and sincerity. You cannot model yourself as a communicator or a speaker off of someone else. It's got to come from inside, your own style. Find what it is, communicate with sincerity, consistency, and authenticity, and you can effectively lead from the information you've got on self and on others. The final baseline for me is one so those two are ones you've heard 1,000 times, in leadership, but just the words that I use to describe it. The final one, for some reason, doesn't get talked about a whole lot and should certainly resonate with all of you, and that's prioritization. I have never seen an effective leader that can't prioritize. Because the bottom line is, in today's world especially, when I wake up every single morning, there's going to be 100 more email in my inbox than when I went to bed the night before. I always think back to when I was director of player development overseeing the farm system, and we had 170 players spread out all over the country, and the staff that were associated, and I was a young guy, and I'd go to bed every night going, oh my God, I've got all these problems. I've got this guy with a sprained ankle, this kid that's having problems, with his wife, this kid that's got a sick mother back in the Dominican Republic, and, I've got these coaches telling me they need players, and, that's where some ability to prioritize, some ability to critically reason, determine, okay, I've got all these problems. Guess what? I've got time to handle 5. That's it. All day today, I've got time to handle 5. I've got 150 problems. Time to handle 5. I better pick the right 5. And you know what happens? 75 of those go away on their own, right? 25 move up into the more emergent priorities, and guess what? 100 more come on overnight. So if you can't prioritize, if you don't hire people that have the ability to critically reason, that have that ability to say, I understand what's the highest leverage. And you know what? Terry Francona is amazing. He's amazing. He may not have a process for how he walks through it that's similar to you and I, but he knows exactly what he has to deal with that day. And he understands how much time he's got. And that doesn't mean he doesn't think about it. He's thinking about it 24 hours a day, that he's awake. He's thinking about it all the time. But he is amazing at picking the right ones to deal with. It's an absolute separator for him. His communication is a separator. His awareness of his players is a separator. But his ability to know, I know the strings I've got to pull today that are most important to this team's success. And I've never seen a leader who didn't do that. Final story for you, because my separator on leadership is my same separator on talent. It's accountability. And I'll tell you one last story that if you've ever heard me speak, you may have heard this story before, but it's a great one, and it will really crystallize for you, what I mean by accountability when it comes to leadership. That same guy I talked about, Scott Pioli, I was at his wedding in 1998, so a very long time ago, and he happened to marry Bill Parcells' daughter. Right? So how many people in here know who Bill Parcells is? So for those of you that don't know who Bill Parcells is, he is a Hall of Fame NFL coach, one of the best coaches to ever coach in the NFL, and he is a legitimate, authentic, tough guy. He is, as a matter of fact, when you think about stereotypical football coach, this guy's a Jersey, smash-mouth, tough guy football coach, right? So I'm at his daughter's wedding at a restaurant, in the rehearsal dinner, maybe like 20 people in the room. There wasn't even really a wedding party. It was like Scott and two friends, Dallas, and I think her family, and, that was it. And so we're about halfway through dinner, and Bill Parcells looks at me and he goes, Mark, how's the tribe doing? So I was assistant GM in 98. I've been 6 different roles with the team over my tenure, but I was a number 2 guy in baseball operations to John Hart. And I said, Bill, you know what? We're banged up. Lofton's hurt, Fryman's hurt. We're hanging in there, but we're banged up. He goes, Mark, I got one piece of advice for you. Nobody gives a shit. So I kind of look down. I go, okay. Should I write that down? Let me. And he goes, remember that. Nobody gives a shit. That's my advice to you. So everybody kind of goes back to their meal. They cut, it was a quick dinner from that point on. The next day, it was a noon wedding. We're coming down the receiving line. I'm shaking. I hug Scott. I hug Dallas. I get to Bill. Shakes my hand. He goes, remember what I told you. Nobody gives a shit. I'm like, dude, it's your daughter's wedding, man. I didn't say that's what I'm thinking. So I was like, okay, whatever. I go down. Later that night, I'm at the reception, walk into the bathroom, go to the urinal. No, Bill, and he's had a few pops at that point, so he's going to go. And he goes, remember, I said, I got it. I got it. Yeah, nobody gives a shit. So, flash forward. That was 1998. 2002, I'm GM. June 26th, I'm sitting alone in my office. And, when I got a chance to be GM, we had come off 7 incredible years of baseball here, right? 2 American League championships, 6 division championships. And then I got a chance to take over as the economy was going down. The farm system was depleted in talent, which is natural for when you win a lot. We had traded away a lot of players in that process. The Browns were back after not having been here, so competition. There was no newness to the ballpark. All the things that kind of came together over that incredible period. And our players were aging, too. The contracts were starting to expire. And so we're heading towards this cliff. But guess what? Players don't know we're headed towards the cliff. The fans, you guys, didn't know we were heading towards the cliff. No one knew but about 10 people on the 4th floor at Progressive Field, Jacobs Field at that point, and our owner, who I told when I took over, hey, we're going to have at some point, we're going to have a tough point. And I'm staring a trade in the face. Bartolo Colon, the best pitcher we developed, since Bob Feller, who's going to be a Hall of Famer and unbelievably still pitching now, for a guy named Lee Stevens, a journeyman, and 3 minor leaguers. So that's the way it's going to come across ESPN, right? Bartolo Colon traded for Lee Stevens and 3 minor leaguers. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to roll that one out. Now, listen, those 3 minor leaguers ended up being Cliff Lee, Grady Sizemore, and Brandon Phillips. But at that time, one was in AAA, one was in AA, and one was in the Florida State League hitting 220, right? So that's the way it's going to come off. They traded Bartolo Colon for Lee Stevens and 3 minor leaguers. What do they think? It's a first move we'd have made in 8 years that didn't singularly represent just winning. And I'm going to disappoint the players. I'm going to disappoint the fans. I'm going to disappoint everyone in that office that worked below the 10 people around me, because no one's going to understand, because it was about the future. It wasn't about that moment, and it wasn't winning for the first time, but it was either that or let it become obvious to everybody what we had to do. And guess what? That's 8 to 10 years, guys. That's losing enough in baseball to pick the top 5 picks, because it's a very disproportionate value to draft picks. Letting those guys come through the farm system, Exactly like Kansas City's doing right now. They've got seven guys who are picking the top 7 picks of the draft on that team. Exactly like they've done. And then after 29 years or whatever it's been since they've been in the playoffs, eventually you get back. But we had just won a ton. I'm thinking that's not what I wanted. I'm not signing up for that. So how do you turn the entire club over, which we ended up doing in just 3 years later, win 92 games and contend, and then 2 years after that win 96, the most in the big leagues? You have to make a tough decision. So what am I thinking about? I'm sitting at my desk, June 26th, Bartolo Colon for Lee Stevens and 3 minor leaguers. God, everyone's going to hate me. Nobody gives a shit. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, you know what? You know what it means? It means, hey, I have a lot of objective reasons why I can feel sorry for myself. I have a lot of objective reasons why we should fail, all those things I mentioned to you. But guess what? Nobody cares. You know what your job is? Find a way to get it done. You know what my job is? Don't wallow. Don't take the excuses. The excuses are out there for us every single day. Every single day we wake up, there's an objective reason why we should not be successful that day. Objective reason. Players have it. Their hamstrings tight. The umpire's terrible. The umps are always terrible. The field is in bad shape. There's no fans in the stadium. It's gray out. The game, they're having a fight with their wife. For me, I talked about the economy. I listed those challenges. There's a million reasons why we shouldn't be successful every single day. But guess what? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. You don't care. Find a way to get it done. Find a way to win. Find a way to be successful. That's what Bill Parcells was saying. And that is the ultimate separator in leaders. And when you get great talent, like I talked about, do you deploy that talent in a culture where they know how important they are to the collective success of an organization? And you have great leaders that spur people and motivate people and help people understand those things and help determine and establish that culture, then you pour champagne and then you celebrate. And in those moments when we poured champagne, whether it was knocking the Yankees out of the playoffs in 2007 or whether it was last year, when we clinched the wild card against the Twins to get into the playoffs for the first time in 6 years, I'm never thinking about what you guys are thinking about. I'm never thinking about just the accomplishments of that season. I'm thinking about the physical therapist who rehabbed the 17-year-old Dominican kid in 110 degrees in Phoenix, who eventually became Danny Salazar, who we rode the second half of last year. I'm thinking about the scout who drove in the Pacific Northwest. I'm thinking about the intern who crunched video and developed an advanced scouting report that helped us have a competitive advantage. I'm thinking about the young kid from Cornell who came in and established a pricing model that led to 23% in revenue increase last year despite flat attendance. I'm thinking about the 17-year-old kid who we read his analytics on scouting and helped us to have a much better scouting performance and much better scouting model over the last 3 years. I'm thinking about all those people that contribute to behind what is a success that shouldn't happen, that objectively shouldn't happen. And those are the great moments. So those are my formal remarks for you guys today. I don't know if I have time for a few questions. I'd love to be able to hear from you guys and answer any questions you have on the technology side or just hear some thoughts you've got as well. What's that? We won the first game 8-2. That was and 1-0. Good guys or bad guys? All right, good. I did see T.J. House strike a guy out right before I came up. That's the only question? You guys want to get out of here, I'm sure. He asked what the score of the first game was. Anybody else? Okay, well,
So, how long has Billy Dean been started Moneyball? How long do you think it would have been before we moved where we are now?
Yeah, it would have happened anyway. It was largely already, Billy I just talked to 2 days ago. He is a friend of mine, and I think anytime a book gets written or a movie gets made, it's been a good education for me, right? Because I'm in the book and a story in the book that's completely inaccurate. And the movie is fictional because I wasn't even GM yet, and he's in my office in the movie. So, it is the movie, and Billy is an incredibly bright, creative guy, but analytics were already on their way, and just like any free market system, looking for inefficiencies within a marketplace. Our baseball system was pushing small market teams to understand that if we didn't start to try to mine value, if we didn't start to try to exploit inefficiencies, that we had no chance. And so at a very base level, when we came in, we said, hey, major league free agency is in itself an inefficiency, right? Because you're signing players who are already past their prime to contracts for past performance. And so we can't compete in that market anyway. So we said our opportunity is trades for young players, player development, scouting, international market. And then what happened is Theo Epstein came in, and Theo Epstein said, hey, what about if we deploy extreme resources in those markets too, as well as Major League Free Agency? And so the same thing happened with OPS that we talk about, Moneyball, that happened with player development and scouting. Inefficiencies get closed. If you're an investor, you know that very clearly. Inefficiencies get closed very quickly. Technology, analytics, how we apply that to decision making, that's the greatest opportunity for us to find inefficiencies in the player personnel market right now. But we're constantly looking for the next thing. And I think as the talent level in baseball and baseball player personnel front offices elevated and escalated, we're all chasing each other, and it constantly revolves. And there are teams that are, Billy still cycles. He still, prior to this team, had 4 losing seasons, and we still always go through cycles. But Tampa Bay, brilliant guys. There are a lot of really smart people working in the game today.
Yeah, so I know that the NFL has taken steps to increase the fan experience with special apps and Wi-Fi, so that
Yeah.
you can maybe get different camera angles all the time in the stadium. Any plans for that?
Yeah, so actually, of all 3 sports leagues, we don't do a lot of things, best, but Major League Baseball Advanced Media is the leader. So if you want to know anything digital, if you go look at MLB At Bat, I think it's the largest downloaded pay app in all of Apple history. So, we have an incredible app that has an unbelievable wealth of information, the free app, but the pay app, now there's MLB At the Ballpark app, which, as more and more ballparks, and it sounds incredible, right? We just got DAS Wi-Fi in our ballpark this year because 20-year-old ballparks didn't have that, and history majors like me didn't realize how big a project that is. Unbelievable. It actually was incredible to me. Like, how can it be that big a project? Like, how can that technology have not advanced more to, thousands of antennas? How can we not be better than that at this point? But that infrastructure is a huge part of, knowing what fan behaviors are. Think about, paper tickets, right? 4 years ago when I was president, we were still almost completely paper tickets. Now we're almost all digital tickets because we have no idea to even know who's in the ballpark without digital ticketing. So I do think, listen, everything is moving this way, everything. And so the way we communicate with our fans, the way you conduct commerce, the way you interact at the ballpark, it will very soon, very quickly, all be and we have the iBeacons now that when you walk in, if you're registered on that ballpark, immediately you'll get an offer. We'll know what you're doing. But it's now a small number of people. It's going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to grow.
How do you increase revenues by 23%
Better, more efficient pricing, better understanding of pricing and how it works. I mean, we were doing a ton of things that were just archaic and were traditional sports marketing, from incenting fans, that basically paying some fans and not rewarding fans that were high value fans enough so we weren't necessarily rewarding the right behaviors, to pricing amazingly efficiently as well. Right.
And where or how did you use data to make those decisions?
So, the right field remodel was a 3-year process of researching. And here's the hard part when it comes to re-envisioning a ballpark, right? Because the underlying principle was always the same. Incredible architectural bones. You've got 2 choices, believe it or not, when you get to 20 years old in a sports facility. You either do what Atlanta does and you tear it down. Unbelievable. Or you have to think about renovation, a major renovation. The right field project, or the right center field project for us, is going to be the first phase of what's going to be a continual renovation over about 2 to 3 years. And if you do the renovation, you say, does the building have a chance to be? I think our building has a chance to be an iconic building. 50 years from now, it could be, on a Fenway, on a Wrigley scale. But to do that, you've got to think about, how does fan experience changed? what are the trends now? Even more, you've got to think about, can you figure out what the trends are going to be over the next 10 to 15 years? So the way our kids watch a game is very different from the way we grew up watching a game. And for us, it was going and saying, what are the things our ballpark lacks? Where are the opportunities? And then the reality that I deal with, that some teams don't deal with, is always, we're going to have to value engineer that to make sure we can afford it and that there's some ROI on that as well, because it's all privately financed. So all those things came together, and when we looked at that project, and some of it was right-sizing the ballpark to the marketplace as well, because all stadium capacities had declined 15% over the last 20 years. That gets back to those challenges I mentioned. More people are watching at home. You know, there's no need for the same. Our biggest challenge is the number of suites. We've got more suites than both New York teams combined. It's almost impossible for us to completely overcome that. We're going to repurpose, and we'll have gotten down from 135 to 85 at the end of this remodel. But what we did was say, we've got this area, we can take advantage of what's happening in the city, re-envision Gate C, create an incredible, compelling entryway, because I think it's got to be compelling. And then we can re-envision, you know, the family experience and the mezzanine level with we've already tested in the kids' clubhouse, make it 2 stories and create interactive and technologically driven games. And then we can take this number of people moving to downtown, that is a big number of young people moving into downtown, you know, with 4,000 apartments online, and say we're going to activate an incredible bar that's going to be unlike any experience that hopefully creates a compelling experience. We already looked at that center field bar and say, hey, on warm summer days, that's a great experience, but could we have something that on all days could be a great experience? It could bring people in. So we did focus groups, then we surveyed, you know, where some data figured into that. But ultimately, I think technology will figure in more than data into what we do in that project. It was really just a lot of research more than anything else. One more.
Was your first reaction, hey, cool, stop resigning LeBron, or was it, oh boy, we really
Yeah, I mean, interesting. I think my first reaction was probably unlike any you expect. My reaction was like, okay. I mean, it was like, okay, I've got a job to do, you know. I mean, and then seeing my son, how excited he was, you know. But in the reality is, you know, our season ticket holders, I mean, are not the same season ticket holders. I know that. You know, you don't know that. I know that. I do know it creates additional challenges on a corporate level for us. From a corporate partnership, but their corporate partnerships are going to go up 300%, so maybe it'll create an opportunity as some people to get priced out of corporate partnerships for them. I know what our situation is. I know what our circumstances are. I choose to take a positive light to that a rising tide's going to, it's counterintuitive, and it's, you know, but I just think, hey, it's going to create, coming downtown is an obstacle. Maybe that'll make it less of an obstacle for more people, and maybe that'll activate and create an energy around, you know, the downtown area. So, and maybe it'll lift the, you know, the self, you know, the negative thought that we never won a championship in this, because I'm not from here, so I don't feel that, you know. And so, from that negative, you know, lens, maybe it'll remove that. So I choose to take a positive view of that. I think from a pure business perspective, it's not going to help us, you know. But I choose to say net when it all, you know, filters out, you know, it's going to be a positive for us, I think.
One real quick, just on when you start to gather data from people's tickets for the demographics, I was surprising to you, are younger, how do you, are younger kids coming to the ballpark?
Yeah.
The attention span, where they are with all the data we have available?
So 2 things about that you just said that are very interesting. One, no, it wasn't surprising, unfortunately, you know, that our fan base is baseball's fan base. It's, you know, affluent white males, 35 to 50. You know, that's terrible. It's a challenge and something that we're never going to be successful until we can make the game, you know, more universally adopted across every segment, you know, both cultural and, you know, age-wise. 2, the attention span issue is not just an attention span issue with our kids. It definitely is with our kids, but it's with you and it's with me. And so I'm also on the Commissioners On-Field Committee, and I've talked to the next commissioner, who I know very well, and I think it's an issue for us as a game. You know, that I think for generations we've kind of assumed, you know, and this is really true, part of what makes baseball unique and incredible is that you can watch films of baseball from 50 years ago, and it's the same game. And you can watch films of football from 50 years ago, and guess what? It ain't the same game. I played in college, and it's not the same game now as I played 25 years ago. And you can watch basketball films, and besides the short shorts they were wearing, it definitely ain't the same game, you know? So baseball is the same game. That's cool. But there are things we need to do to evolve. That 3.5 minutes between ball and play is just too long. And that doesn't necessarily speak to the art of the game. So we need to, we need to do what you do when you make smart decisions. We need to research and understand what the biggest obstacles are to that attention span issue. Some of that's in-park experience and fan experience we can impact outside of the game. Some of that deals with the way the game is played on the field. I think we'll research it. We'll come up with ideas. It's already being done. We'll test them in the minor leagues first. And then much like we've deployed instant replay, which has been really effective and done a really good job at, at doing things we needed to do to adapt the game, you'll see some things done in the next 3 to 5 years that will hopefully make the game more appealing to a broader group of people. But we need to do it. It has to happen. I will be a vocal spokesman of saying it, and I won't ultimately have that decision, but I'm going to push hard for that.
Yeah, thank you.